Welcome to the newest episode of Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. I'm your host, Jason Fraley, picking the brains of the top filmmakers, musicians, and artists of our time. Kenny Babyface Edmonds performs live at MGM National Harbor in Oxon Hill, Maryland this Saturday and Sunday. We spoke about his prolific career writing hits for artists like Boyz II Men, TLC, Toni Braxton, Whitney Houston, and Usher, as well as recording his own solo hits like Every Time I Close My Eyes. Hey, Kenny Babyface Edmonds, thanks so much for joining us on WTOP.
It's good to be here. Thank you.
Now, we're talking because you're coming to MGM National Harbor on April 23rd and 24th for what you're calling the Full Circle Tour, and it's going to be hosted by Sherri Shepherd. So how does that work? Is it you playing music and she's doing some like comedy interludes or something? How's the setup work?
Yeah, I think she opens up first, and then she introduces probably me, and then she'll come on again as we're changing the stage, and then she'll introduce and talk with Kim as well. Introduce him.
Okay, great. So it's going to be several of you up there. Okay, great. So it's the Full Circle Tour, but what new do you got going out?
I'm working on a special project. Not saying exactly what it is right now, but so I'm just excited about the tour though, because we're gonna do in about 28 cities, and I haven't done this kind of tour in such a long time. So it's going to be fun to get out there and do this. And Kim's great and Sherri's great, so it should be a really fun night.
Absolutely. Now, we're excited to see you back in the DC area. There's no way you remember this, but I spoke with you backstage in your dressing room at the Kennedy Center when you did that Marvin Gaye tribute a couple years ago. You sang with Valerie Simpson, I think.
Oh wow, yeah,
that's bringing it back. But yeah, we love seeing you in DC. But in case our listeners, maybe they missed that, remind us. I love hearing your journey. I know you were born in Indianapolis, right? You grew up in Indy.
Yeah.
Remind us just those early days. Like, how did you get into music as a kid? I know some of your brothers went on to do After Seven. Like, it was a musical family, all of you guys. But how did you get into it yourself?
Yeah, I started really early, just kind of like loving music. Probably like when I was 6th grade, started writing my first songs, and went through high school in bands. I must have been in a million bands, different names. And then right out of high school, I joined a band called Manchild. And from there, it was on. I just kept doing it. Had no other choice but to do this. This is what I was born to do, I think.
Exactly. And the name Babyface, that was a Bootsy Collins tag? How'd that come about?
Yeah,
you had a youthful look.
Yeah, I think that's what it was. Fortunately, it worked out for me years later. But he just saw me the first time he saw me, and that's just the name he blurted out, and then everybody started calling me that.
Yeah, it did. Fortunately, like you said, it stuck. It still works. It still applies. Well, very cool. So you mentioned Manchild, the early group, and then I guess was the other one was Deal, I think it was called.
Yeah, the Deal.
So, yeah, the Deal. And so that's where, of course, I bring that up because, of course, that's where you famously met L.A. Reid, and together you guys would combine your names for La Face Records. L.A. the Ella, and Babyface the Face. So you formed that in '89. Do you have memories of meeting him that very first time? Was it magic to start?
I think it was. We just met in a club. Actually, he was performing at a club, the Zodiac Club, I think, and we just ultimately a couple of years later connected and became partners in doing music together.
And just tell me about founding that. The LaFace Records became, that was like, that became the launching point for so many artists there in starting in '89 and on into the '90s. But tell me about forming that label.
Yeah, it was, we ultimately decided we were producing so many different people and things looked like they were working. So we decided to try to start our own label and went down to Atlanta, Georgia, and did it from Atlanta. And thank God that Atlanta had so much talent there and everybody was coming there. So it ultimately worked out for us, and we were able to have a nice little, LaFace was a very special time.
Very, very special time. And I want to get into some of your own solo hits because people remember your actual songs. But just while we're talking your label and all the artists you launched, let me run through a couple of them really quick because you're just behind some of the biggest acts of my soundtrack of my life, all of us. But Man, Boyz II Men. I know you got in with them on, you did End of the Road" with them on, you did End of the Road with them, and
Yeah.
then on the Roman numeral 2 album next, you did "I'll Make Love to You" and "Water Runs Dry," like
Yeah.
iconic stuff on the R&B side. Just working with them, how did you meet those guys, and why do you think it was such a good collab between you guys?
Well, I think the first time we met was End of the Road, which was part of a soundtrack for Boomerang.
Right.
That was a movie called Boomerang that Eddie Murphy did. And so that was the song was actually written for them, written for the movie, and then they were the group to sing it and had them in mind because it had this old Philly international sound. And when that song was written, after that was written, it went so well that they ultimately kind of came back to me, wanted to see. Actually, I think it was Gerald Busby that came back to me, asked if I could write some more, and those are that's how I'll make love to you and Water Runs Dry came out.
And you wrote those songs?
Yes.
That's incredible. We're talking to the on the other side of the Zoom call is the hand that wrote "I'll Make Love to You" and "Water Runs Dry." That blows my mind. They're good. That's great stuff. All right, cool. Well, as if that wasn't enough, Boyz II Men, like arguably one of the greatest R&B, groups of all time. You did one of the greatest R&B, gal groups, TLC, at this around the same time. You helped produce the Crazy Sexy Cool album.
Yeah.
I know it had Waterfalls on there and Creep, but I think which ones did you write? Digging on You and Red Light Special, stuff like that. But just tell me about working with that trio.
Well, TLC was I always say was one of the funnest groups to work with. Whenever they were in the studio, it was always a good time, and they were just fun. And it was, along with getting the music done, you also knew you were going to have so much fun just laughing and kidding around. They were great. And, it was one of my favorite experiences. Is just kind of always working with them.
Definitely. And rest in peace, Left Eye. Good memories you'll have forever for sure. And then of course the Toni Braxtons, you did her first two big albums, and so many hits off of those. Breathe Again, You Mean the World to Me, You're Making Me High, Unbreak My Heart. I mean, it was all over the radio. Experiences with what was memories of putting those two albums together with her?
Yeah, that was we were in the beginning of Toni's career, and so Toni was another, I have to say, a baby from the Boomerang project, because that's where she kind of came out. There were a couple songs that were actually written for Anita Baker that Anita decided not to do. She wouldn't be on it, and then Toni got the song, "Love Should Have Brought You Home," and she sung the demo. And so ultimately, when Anita turned it down, she said, "Maybe you should have that little girl singing that song, that demo." And that's exactly what happened. And she became a big star from that song.
Superstar. All right, well, maybe time for one more that your label launched. The one and only Usher.
Yeah.
We all had that My Way album. You Make Me Wanna and My
Yeah.
Way and Nice and Slow. I mean, that thing was loaded. But memories of sort of discovering him. And we all know him now as this famous, singer dancer, this megastar. But or in those early days, what did you see in him back then?
Well, I think that the memory I have of Usher, first time seeing Usher, was him coming into the to LaFace Records and auditioning. And he was I don't know, 12, 13 years old, and he sung End of the Road, I believe. And but he was like this adult, the way he was singing and singing to all the girls in the room. So it was clear that he was destined to become a star from the beginning.
Wow, that's so great. And then I also, in addition to those, music albums, I'm a big movie guy myself, so I wanted to ask you about some of that. I mean, you mentioned Boomerang earlier, but Waiting to Exhale, you put that together, that iconic title track with Whitney, and then I guess Mary J. Blige had Not Gonna Cry on there. Brandy had Sitting Up in My Room, like that. That whole
Yeah.
thing was like that spawned a bunch of hits, including in addition to the actual movie was being a success. But how did you get recruited to do that whole project?
Actually, I got a call from Forrest Whitaker,
Oh, cool.
who was the director of the film, and who came and sat with me and asked if I would not just write the music, but also score the film as well, which I had never done. I was a little nervous about that, but he said, "I'm sure you can do it, and and let's just go for it." And so it was certainly a call that came from forced, and me actually sitting with them, that it ultimately got me to decide to do it. And it was a great experience, and great working with Whitney in that way as well.
Yeah, Whitney was all timer. Would you say? I mean, because you worked with her on another movie project, The Prince of Egypt, with that "When You Believe" song too. But like, would you say? I mean, is that the all time voice you've ever heard? Or I mean, that's hard to say, but she's got to be up there, right?
No, no question. I've always said that Whitney was my favorite voice ever, and it's still to this day. She's like my number one.
But why is that? If we can unpack that, like, what is it about the quality? I mean, we've all heard the iconic Star Spangled Banner. I mean, we've heard all of, I will always love you. I mean, she can belt those notes. Us as a listener side, we're like, yeah, she can belt. But from like an actual genius music side yourself, what is the quality of her voice that makes it her the best?
She just her notes seem to always be heartfelt. They were always not sung in any kind of technical way, just sung strictly from the heart, much like a gospel singer would do. Period. And she just had that timbre, that tone in her voice that just I always connected to, and it was amazing. She was blessed with an amazing voice.
Definitely. Well, you were blessed with your own. As promised, I wanted to circle back around to your own stuff that was released under your your name too. Tell me about Tender Lover. I think that album had what, like three number one R&B songs on, I think. But putting that together, did you like doing solo stuff or did you prefer producing other people?
I was more behind the scenes kind of guy. I was kind of like, um, it was the record of the Dick Griffey, who was head of Solar Records, that kind of pressed the point of me doing a solo album, because otherwise I was kind of fine just to be in the deal. And but he kept on pushing that, so ultimately I reluctantly, went ahead and did this album and was trying to figure it out. And there was an album before it, and then the second album started to try to figure out, okay, what is this artist thing? Who am I as an artist, and how should I approach it? Because being a songwriter, I always wrote so many songs for different people, so it was always I didn't always know how to write for my voice, so it was really writing for everyone. And through that process, I kind of figured out, okay, where I could fit in as well.
Right, for sure. Well, I think at least the one I remember that was my favorite, at least growing up, was Every Time I Close My Eyes. I guess that was
Mhm.
96. I
Yeah.
mean, take me into the creation of that. Do you remember where you were when you wrote it or why you wrote it?
Yeah, every time I close my eyes, it's actually written. Kenny G had come to me, and he said that Luther had agreed to do one song with him on his album, and
Luther Vandross.
Luther Vandross, yes. And so he asked me if I could write a song for Luther Vandross, and I said sure. And I was working on my album at the time, and but I stopped and I started working on this song, Every Time I Close My Eyes, for Luther to sing. And then Luther was in the studio at the same time, and he came by and he listened to it. He said, "I love the song, but that's not for me." And so ultimately, I got every time I close my eyes, but as a reject, and I ended up doing the song instead.
Nice. I just love, man, we can be having a casual conversation about one song and then you're just name dropping all these. I mean, it's like, oh yeah, and I was with Luther Vandross and oh, you just Kenny G. I mean, you've worked with everybody. And didn't you also do something with Clapton around that time? Change the world, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yes,
yeah.
yeah.
Was that your original arrangement to say change the world, or was it change on the paper and Clapton took that, or who did that genius arrangement of change the world?
That probably sounds like something I don't know anybody would have did Chang Yang. So probably I never even thought of it as Chang Yang. So I didn't know I was doing anything different till you just mentioned it. So thanks for pointing that out. Chang Yang, okay. No, it was an
That's a weird question, right? I don't know why I
arrangement.
came out that way.
No, it's funny. But I think that the song was originally done by I think it was I'm starting to forget the name at this point. Um, but it had already been done, and so I had to take the song and make it fit for Eric. And I wasn't even sure about it at first, and I didn't even know that Eric Clapton even knew who I was. But I got the word that he was interested in doing it, but he would only be interested in doing it if I would consider producing it. So I was kind of on the hot seat and had to figure out some cool stuff for it. And he's actually the one that pushed me to do backgrounds on it as well. And so that's kind of like how it all happened.
Gotcha. It was, I believe it was Winona did the original.
Yeah, Winona Jet, exactly.
Wow. Well, I mean, we've so many blasts from the past. We've been rattling off all these, 80s and 90s titans, yourself included. But there's been a lot of life and career since then too. Is there, if some of our listeners remember all these huge Boyz II Men, TLC, and your own stuff, Usher, all this stuff, if they remember all this, but maybe they haven't kept up with some of your recent stuff, which would you tell them to go pick up before they head out to National Harbor? Of all of your albums in like the decade to since, like, what do you have one or two that you're most proud of?
I can't even think at the moment because there's been a lot of things. But I think what will happen in the show, when I do my show, I always go through a medley of songs that I've written and produced for other people as well, and that's a really fun part of the show. And it's really going down memory lane, and everybody has a good time. So it's high energy, and the show's going to be great. So I hope everybody comes out to see it.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate you, going down memory lane with us here too. Just sort of, in closing final minutes here, big picturing, looking back on the whole career, it's got to be bizarre. You're sort of probably at the point where in 2013, you're getting Hollywood Walk of Fame. You're starting to get, you were almost at this point where you can start getting, I don't want to call it life achievement stuff because you got a while to go, but you know what I mean? Like it's some career achievement type stuff like the Walk of Fame.
Yeah.
But, how big of an honor is when you start getting stuff like that? You see your name plastered on a sidewalk, and you get to look back and take stock of a career.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where you kind of it's a little surreal when you start to see that stuff, and I never make too much of it. I think if I were to say anything, I let a lot of things go by where there was successes and things that were happening at the time that I didn't necessarily stop to smell the roses or stop and appreciate it at the time, because you're always in a work mode, and I think that's just part of being kind of like who I am. I'm always kind of on to the next and always working on something else. So trying to slow down and appreciate things a little bit more at this time.
Yeah, I like that. Smell the roses, I like that. Well, bringing it full circles, I know we talked to you at the Kennedy Center last time backstage for the Marvin Gaye thing, but man, I think I want to start the push to get you a Kennedy Center honor at some point. I think you deserve it after everything we just mentioned. Come on, if you're listening, Kennedy Center, give the man his flowers while he's smelling the roses.
I appreciate that. Thanks so much, man.
Yeah, I mean, what are you at now? Like 12 Grammys or something?
I have 12 Grammys, yeah.
12. Where do you keep them? You got a dozen of them. That's too much for one mantle.
Oh, yeah, I just put them on a piano and stuff like that.
That's great. Well, I really, really appreciate you joining us again, everybody. It is the Full Circle Tour with Sherry Shepherd, and who else is with you?
Cam.
Okay, yeah. All of them are going to be at MGM National Harbor on April 23rd through 24th. So get your tickets now. Kenny Babyface Edmonds, thanks so much for joining us. It's always great chatting with you.
Thank you. You too, buddy. Take care.
We also spoke in 2016 in his dressing room backstage at the Kennedy Center Spring Gala. Salute to Marvin Gaye. I'm here with the one and only Babyface. Thanks so much for joining us.
It's good to be here. Thank you.
Now, this is awesome. We're backstage in your Kennedy Center dressing room. Looking around here, this is an awesome little spot. So, A, what are you going to be doing tonight? And B, what does Marvin Gaye mean to you?
A, I'm doing How Sweet It Is to Be Loved by You, and then doing Ain't No Mountain High Enough with Valerie Simpson, which is going to be very cool to sing with her, to be her Nick for the night.
She wrote it, I mean.
Yeah, she wrote it, yeah, so it's amazing. And I mean, Marvin is, I don't know who doesn't love Marvin Gaye. And how important he is. I've always looked at him as a national treasure for America and for the world. We all love his music and grown up with it, and it's a part of our DNA at this point.
Speaking of growing up with it, do you remember the first time you heard it? How old you were?
I think I remember the Tammy and Terrell thing, and also How Sweet It Is to Be Loved by You. It's from the very early stuff, but I just have a clear visual of seeing him and Tammy Terrell on what was it, Dick Clark show, American Bandstand. Yeah.
You'll never forget that, seeing that. That's for sure. Do you have a favorite Marvin Gaye song?
It's hard.
It's tough.
It's really hard. There are so many.
Is there one you think has inspired you the most?
Well, we just heard "I Want You," and then but there's "Distant Lover," and then there's, I mean, he has love songs, and then he has songs that are social conscious songs, and so he was, quite an artist. They just, we don't make them like him anymore.
Speak to each of those. First there's the sexual healing, and then there's the social healing. Speak to each of those and why he was so great at that.
Well, I think what he was so great at, he always reached inside and wrote from an emotion that like lived inside of him, and he wasn't afraid to bear it. He put it all out there, put it on his records, and so you could only imagine that he had to be somewhat tortured of how he laid it all right there, in the music.
Definitely. Well, it might be hard for you to believe, but you grew up listening to Marvin Gaye. I grew up listening to you. Every time I close my eyes and all the songs you wrote and produced, you're a legend in your own right, sir. Let me just rapid fire really quick. I'll throw out a name and first thing that comes to your mind. Because we had Boyz II Men here, played at the Kennedy Center. Nice. You did Water Runs Dry and I'll Make Love to You Then. What was just a quick first thing that you think of working with them?
Oh, great time always. It's always great because they sing so well, and so we can kind of get through it really fast. It's a lot of fun.
Toni Braxton.
Classic voice. She's every time she sings on the microphone, immediately you know it's Toni Braxton.
Whitney Houston.
The best, my greatest of all time for me. I was fortunate to work with Mariah and Whitney separately and together. We did the Prince of Egypt together, so that was amazing.
What about Change the World with Eric Clapton?
Another big point in my life that I never saw that coming, but it came, and I'm so glad to be a part of it.
TLC.
That's our first girl group on the Face that still has the record of being the biggest selling female group of all time. So I'm very proud of them.
We could go on and on with this. We're not gonna. You've worked with all the legends, and you're a legend yourself. So, just bringing it full circle. How excited are you to be here at the Kennedy Center and such a prestigious place? Honoring such a famous guy.
I'm honored to be part of it, and it's great singers that are performing tonight, and so I gotta put my A game on and try to come hard because it ain't gonna be easy.
I think you got it.
Yeah, I'll work on it.
Thanks, sir. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Thanks so much for joining us on Beyond the Fame with Jason Fraley. Remember to hit the subscribe button and give us a 5-star rating if you like what you hear. We'll see you next time. I wanted to take a second to tell you about an app I really enjoy. Living in the DC area is great, and Podcast DC gathers all of the local shows that I like all in one local app. Health, sports, local news, politics, and so much more. Podcast DC is the new local app with hundreds of DC area podcasts to choose from. I can earn exciting rewards just for listening and share the podcasts I love instantly. Available in the App Store or in Google Play, listen local with Podcast DC.